I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Planning and Zoning. Today is Friday, January 26th. It's 1:03. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a roll call, please.
Chairman Sean Poole.
Here.
Member Randy Stout.
Here.
Member Lori Simpson.
Here.
Member Lisa Burke.
Here.
Member Joe Malin.
Here.
City Attorney Nancy Meyer. Here.
Thank you. All right, first some approval of our minutes from our last meeting. To have a motion or discussion regarding the minutes from last meeting. We're reviewing.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Any discussion? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Perfect. Moving right along. On today's agenda, first on the agenda is the approval of the keys at Cody River Plat. I'm assuming we're Mr. Mike. Any discussion regarding that?
No, we're good on our side. Staff recommends the P&Z to push it forward to City Council for approval.
Okay.
I think the applicant is on phone or Zoom or some fancy way.
Perfect.
Do you have any questions for them there via Zoom?
I don't have any questions. Any other- Rest of the board, have any questions or comments? Or you should recognize this from before. We did this years ago.
What's that?
We did this years ago, you and I.
Yeah, you did do this previously. They changed their configuration, so that's why they're kind of to start that process
Right.
over. So best practices would be for them to present what they're asking for.
Sure.
So that there's a record of that, and that way anyone can question or comment as they need to.
Cynthia Lawson is on there as well as Mr. Yeckes.
Ms. Lawson, can you tell us what modification you made for those who are not familiar with the project?
Cynthia, can you hear the chair?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I said, is it possible you could review what changes were made for those people who are not familiar with the project from the beginning?
Carlos, do you want to speak or do you want me to speak?
Go ahead, you did.
Yeah, the purpose of doing this replat is originally the property was platted for individual single lot home sales. And currently the project is being developed for build to rent for multifamily for rental as a rental community. So the old lot lines are no longer applicable. And really this property is developed as one, basically a one lot project, but the lines on the plat were broken up to accommodate the existing wetlands on the property. So all the utilities and all the internal roads will all be private. Everything will be maintained by the owner, and the city will have no responsibility for maintenance items within the development.
Was there any modification to the density?
I think there's less density than there was before. We've got 126 units.
That sounds
Correct. There were 176 units approved.
right. Right. Okay. So the density reduced. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Comments? We have a motion?
Is there anybody here from the public that
Oh,
neighbors?
sorry. Thank you very much. Anybody from the public who would like to speak on this? They didn't write down for it, but nope. Okay, it's back to the board. I remember this project when we approved it originally for 175, so I'm happy they're reducing the actual density. That's better, easier on us, easier on traffic patterns and everything else, so. Let's see if I find it. Just leave it
I need a motion, somebody. Whether we approve or answer any questions.
Yeah, you can recommend approval, you can recommend denial, you can recommend
Say what
approval
you-
with amendment, on
Yeah,
modifications,
absolutely. Yep.
anything. And if you have more questions for staff or
Yeah, I have a
or the
question,
applicant.
just to help
Absolutely.
jog my memory.
Absolutely.
What road is this on?
Washington's the major thoroughfare that it runs against.
This the one, okay, so they put all the pavement in and everything?
Yes.
They stopped.
So there were no modifications to the plan itself. They just want it to be one property instead of having all the lot lines.
So
That's what they're asking.
So what they've done is they've reduced the actual density and changed the actual product. So the product was a single-family product, which would require them to comply with setback requirements and everything else. And by switching now and changing them, modifying the plat and making it townhomes, there's 0 lot lines that way. So, correct? Is that right?
Did they not say that 2 years ago? They did say that it was going to be duplexes 2 years ago. So
This is
that's what I'm
discussion.
asking why it's different. What are
Well,
we actually changing?
it's duplexes, not townhomes. That's The duplexes. original plat that was recorded was for single family. Okay. And so for them to go in and actually replat what is actually there, this is the process they have to go through. We have to basically approve this one here to take to council. Council will annul the original that was platted, and that's the way they can go to the county and
The
redo it.
original way back. So really
Yeah.
what they're saying is,
Yeah,
we're going way back before the meetings before, we're going way back
yep,
to the start of this whole plan where it was separate lots, and we're going to make it into one lot that is operated by the owner.
correct.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions, comments? Have a motion?
I move to approve it.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Lori's nay? Okay, perfect. You get that, you catch it, Ashley? Thank you. All right. Moving along. Recreational vehicle parks in a PUD. So we're circling back around.
Yes, you might recognize the RV park term again, it's back. Since you last heard about it and talked about it, Mr. Cobbler's had a chance to sit down with the possible developers of the site.
Okay.
And he's here, obviously, to correct anything I say incorrectly or add to the conversation. But based on that conversation with the possible developers, it became evident to him that what the track we were going wasn't quite going to get what they needed, and get them to the goal they're trying to get to. So a unit development allowing for an RV park probably is the best route. So did you get any, I don't know what documentation you actually received other than the cover? I can see that. I know we have a lot. All right, so what you have, what's been provided is kind of an outline of would go into an ordinance, would ultimately go into the code allowing for a recreational vehicle park in a PUD district. Just want to have that conversation, let you look at the language. Council was advised at the meeting Tuesday that this is something that will be coming their way, so they've looked at it, talked about it a little bit. We want your input and your thoughts about the language that's in there. If there's other conditions you think we should discuss or requirements that you think would be warranted. Of course, staff is here. They've been part of this process too, and they can answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Can you round robin this one? Ms. Lisa, you have any questions?
No.
Randy?
So the last meeting or something, we agreed that we would change it to agriculture, and that was going to solve all these problems.
Right, so the prior discussion was just to change the permitted uses in the A1 district to allow for the recreational vehicle park.
It's currently zoned ag.
Yeah, and so that started the process. As we did that, getting that to council, and that whole it takes time for all that to happen. That's when Mr. Cobbler met with the possible developers and the ideas they have for that property. Just doing that one little fix would not be enough. They would have to come back multiple times and ask for different variations on things. And so the thought process was something like this would allow the city and the developer to work together through our code, through these provisions, to develop and plan for what they're trying to do, with obviously city council and planning and zoning having a part in that.
So it sounds like before one of the options was just to do a special exemption. Would that be a way to go then? It would all be special to this one project and doesn't change anything else?
And Mr. Copper might be better to answer that because he met with the developers, but I think the issue is the different levels of things they want to try to do on this property. We need something between the developer and the city that has more control mechanisms to it. That's the right word.
Yeah, I think,
You state your name for the record, please.
I'm sorry.
That's correct.
I know who I am, I'm sorry.
I appreciate that.
Matthew Koppler, city manager here in Port Richey. And I apologize for that. I was thinking that, but then I started thinking about the question. So I think in the problem that I see in the way that you suggest doing it is that they are doing more than just an RV park. There's going to be campgrounds, there's going to be things that don't fit nicely into a definition of what an RV park is. And again, it's something that I don't know necessarily if you want to see in other areas or even duplicated in other parts of the A1 district. And so doing a PUD, it fits really nicely because one, it allows them to come in with a plan for all those different aspects of what they vision that land to be used for. You get to approve it one time rather than piecemeal, because I think, as the city attorney said, you start listening to what they're doing, it doesn't just fit into an RV park, so we'd have to come back and say, okay, we're going to allow a campground as well. And then we'd have to come back and say, oh, we're going to allow cabins within a campground, where a PUD will allow them to put all those up front. You and council will approve those, and we don't have to piecemeal the project going forward. Now,
That's the same thing as when we did Cody Keys.
Correct.
It's the same thing.
let me just also add that should they want to expand it, they have to come back and go through the process to do the expansion, which I think is important. So you can consider, what the changes mean to not only the property they want to do this for, but also to the surrounding property, which again, I think PUDs give you a little bit more ability to look at, how does this fit into the area that they're trying to fit it in? Does it make sense or doesn't it make sense?
I'm going to play devil's advocate, and that's the question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of this project because I think it's something we need here very much. The closest RV park that even resembles something that anybody want to stay at is probably 30 miles from here. So this is a great project, I think it's going to be. By switching this to PUD, however, what stops your clients from going through the process and realizing that this is just an undertaking they don't want to do, and they put it up for sale as a PUD, an approved PUD, and now we've got some developer knocking on doors and want to build 350 homes.
So with the PUD and the RV park, so regardless of what you do with the PUD, that could happen.
Sure.
I mean, that the PUD doesn't affect that. What it does do, though, is it limits them and subsequent owners to just following what they, was approved through the process. So they couldn't come in and say, well, you gave us an RV park and I can't think of a new use that they want to put in there, but it wasn't part of the master plan that was part of the PUD, which, again, the city and the developer agreed this is how this is going to be developed. They wouldn't be able to do that.
So the city has the ability to put caveats on the PUD, not just give them a blanket zoning.
Absolutely. And that's what
That's the concern.
Yeah,
You see what I'm saying?
And the PUD allows that. As you can see from some of the description within the paperwork you got, it's very
Right.
specific what they can and can't do. They can come back and ask for modifications, and there's conversations can happen. You can put conditions of all kinds of things on there to help control what you're.
I think I'm just trying to address Lisa's comment because we've dealt with this in the past, similar something like this. Okay, all right.
Yeah, and again, I think, from the city's perspective, the control of what the development is greater going through the PUD process. And again, I think it helps set them up for success so they can be successful within the the city of Port Richey.
What does staff say?
We're on board. We're on board with what you have in front of you. I mean, it's a great project. It's something I think that would really enhance the effects of the city.
Absolutely.
It does fit in better through a PUD than doing a change and everything, like Mr. Copper said. So we're on board with what we've got there. We're just looking if there's any suggestions or anything you guys might have before we send it to council.
And if I may, so there's some parts in here that really are, so let me take a step back. So most of this was something that we took from the city of Crystal River. And I think looking at the history, they kind of struggled a little bit with this concept and finally came to the realization that a PUD was going to be the best way to handle it going forward. And so we're, not recreating the wheel and trying to put this together in a way that takes the wisdom that they experienced and put it together to apply to ours. With that being said, there may be some things that are different here than there in Crystal River. And for instance, one of the things is the density question. So right now within a PUD, I believe the density is 16, 18, I can't remember. It's either 16 or 18. This is only going to allow 8 per acre. Again, that could be something that as you think about it, could go up, it could go down. It really ultimately is going to be what the city council determines that number to be.
Why was that decided to write it that way? 16 instead, or 8 instead of 16? Who said, let's do 8 instead of 16?
Well, and that's why, again, when I presented this to council to start getting I pointed out the same thing I wanted to point out to you, is that this is what Crystal River had recommended. It's different than ours. And so from our standpoint, we wanted to get that feedback from both you and city council on what should that number be. Should it be consistent with what, is required in PUDs, which again is an acceptable answer. Should it be more, which again is an acceptable answer. It depends upon what, ultimately you and council believe that number should be with that. I think 8 is probably at the low end.
That's much easier to see on a drawing, isn't it? It's hard to see it in a park.
Well,
8 in an acre doesn't seem like a lot to me. I suppose it depends on what size they are, but 8 doesn't seem like a lot.
No, it's not long.
Not if it's an RV.
No.
yeah, and I believe the piece of property that we're talking about is 16 acres, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a little over 16.
Well, I'm going to round to 16 because I can do math better. So, we're talking then about 128. Yes, that's the number.
But that can be changed.
But that can go up.
Once it's a PUD, that can be changed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, I'm pointing it out so I make sure that you at least think about that and say, one of the answers could be we think 8's too low, but we think 30's too high. And, we could work with council then to come up with the right number. And one of the homework assignments I was given was to talk with Crystal River about, this and why they came up with 8. I think part of the reason that they did that, looking in the history, is where they were going to be putting one was surrounded by a lot of residential, and they didn't want to see the particular traffic issues that may come with, any type of development that occurs there. So they may have a totally...
The land and what's around it would make a difference.
Exactly. I mean,
Yes.
yeah, if you drop this in the middle of a residential area, it's going to have a different impact than if you put it in, say, where we're looking.
And this property is near a lot of commercial, so.
Yeah. So I guess that'd be one thing to think about as you go through this. Is there an appetite for a denser type of development there or not? And again, from my standpoint, I think the right answer is somewhere between 8 and into the 20s. I think you get too far down the road. I don't know if with the amount of, for instance, the open space that's required as part of the PUD, which again, we just lifted the language from the existing PUD code and said that's what the open space requirements need to be. And we tried to align those things that came up in the draft that we already addressed in the PUD code or in the underlying code, which is the A1 district. So we tried to align those as much as possible.
I have a question. What is the transient guest and temporary living quarters? Are there time restrictions on that?
So with, in this, and that was something internally we've had a lot of discussion on, how best to address that issue. And where we were at in the beginning was putting a time frame certain on what that would be. And I think we're talking somewhere in the 90 to 120 day as that. But then the practicality of putting that in started to become an issue because to understand, how long any particular unit's there is you have to know when the start date is of that. And you also have to have the ability to go in and monitor that on a regular basis. And it became, at least from my perspective, maybe burdensome on the city to try to, keep track of if, again, we have 128 plus units in there, keeping track of every one of those. The other practical thing is that there probably is an easy way to subvert that. Granted, it may be a little bit uncomfortable. They could easily move, from one part of the park to another park, start the contract over, and they would have achieved the goal, at least the spirit of what this code was trying to do. I think we then went to a more open-sided where, okay, we're going to, as part of this overall process, we're going to require the developer to provide to us, that information from, related to the contracts that they're going to be signing with the individuals that are going to be there, look at that as a way to hold them accountable for what they say they're doing, and do periodic checks to make sure that what they said they're doing is they're doing. There was just a lot of ways that you could go around us putting a date on there that would have made it very difficult.
I kind of like how state park. You can stay for 2 weeks and then you have to be gone 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I guess if this were a city of Port Richey park, we would have a lot more control over how that was implemented and worked. Being not us, and would mean we would have to have a higher level of enforcement to ensure that everyone that came in lived up to that. It would be, again, a burden to the city in doing that. And I think it would be burdensome to the owner of the property as well.
I'm gonna guess your residents, temporary residents there would be paying each month, let's say, or once a week or whatever, but it's not gonna be real easy to say, okay, you've been here 6 months and you have to leave for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and again, that's going to fall back on what the developer, owner of the RV park, what their rules and regulations are, which again will be submitted to the city as part of the final approval process, as well as whatever documentation they'll provide to the city that shows how they're going to manage that. And undoubtedly, those questions are all going to be asked as they bring the site plan forward for approval.
My main concern with that is I'm just looking 20 years from now. I'm going to see 20-year-old campers sitting there. The people have been living there for 15 years or so.
Yeah.
And we have that around here now.
Yeah, and again, I think that's one of our concerns as well. And the ability to, well, I think from our perspective and looking at the way this language is, we have the ability to intercede when it becomes very clear that they no longer are doing transient living there. This gives us the ability to go back to them through the processes we have to address it. Regardless of whether we're saying, 90 days or 120 or 6 months, we feel we have the ability to address those issues as they come up.
Maybe something would be to build on that. Would that be something responsible that code enforcement would have the right to drag through and say this is not considered according to the code, this is no longer a transient vehicle. This can't be here.
Property.
Oh, it's private
Private
property.
property.
So we have to rely on the property owner to manage that process.
And I believe most of the ones that I've looked into, they have stipulations to answer. Remember, the style is they have stipulations like your RV can't be older than 10 years old to be in there. Some of these parks are doing there, and I believe the developers spoke at City Council. They have a draft of, like Mr. Copper said, a contract that states how long they can be in there and all their other stipulations. We don't have that yet.
Sure.
We will get that once we get this process in and they actually start the PUD process. But we're definitely look into that because we don't have that enforcement piece on the private property.
And let me say again, we're coming to you as part of this to get your input and for you to say, we're not comfortable with the way that you have that wording. We think it should be a date certain. It's okay to say that because there's no pride in authorship here, and we want to make sure that you've had your say in a code that's going to affect the city for a long time.
That can also be changed, just like the density, that can be changed. Really what we're really considering is just the PUD thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And again, we think that process better protects the city long term to make sure that the development is thought through a lot of different issues rather than kind of coming back through the process when the site plan comes in front of you and now all of a sudden we're trying to address a lot of issues that may be coming up. So we're just trying to set a set of standards that make sense.
Can I ask which product you guys were emulating in Crystal River? Is it the Encore up there? Which park was it?
I'm not sure which one it was because do they have two, I think? Or
There's two there.
yeah, there was one that I think
One is much nicer than the other.
there was one that started this process and it kind of got cut short. And then there's the one, I think is the most recent one, whichever one that would be, is the one that really was developed under this particular code up there in Crystal River.
The Encore. That's a nice park.
I think the other piece that I just wanted to, again, point out to you that, could or may not be unique within Crystal River and how it impacts here in the city is on the second page of that at the top where it talks about dimensional standards, and then there's a table. Primarily, it's the waterfront jurisdiction of wetlands setback. Again, they're a little bit different because I think the waterways up there are owned differently than they are in this particular case. But again, understanding that it is a PUD and understanding that another PUD could come up in the city in the A1. We want to make sure that we address it as thoughtfully as possible, but is the setback from the waterways. And I think, again, there's a value in maintaining a distance from any waterway, whether it's one that traverses throughout the whole community or if it's contained in one area. Think about it in different parts of the city where there may be a lake with houses around there. In those, we do have a setback from the water from where, the disturbance of ground or a house or a building could be built. And so that's how you need to look at that particular section of the code is that, does it make sense to have 25 feet away from a body of water or a wetland to protect that particular, asset within the community, or is, 15 feet okay? I think the other piece of all this is the developer will be going through other agencies for final approval as well, and they're going to have their own requirements that will have an impact on that final site plan. But just from our standpoint, we're looking for, what is that minimum, maximum type of setback should there be?
Ms. Simpson?
I just wanted to say, I would recommend going less, as few as possible, because it's going to keep it scale. I have an acre behind my house, and I'm envisioning eight large RVs there, and 8 is about just perfect. And if you have them real close together, I've been to RV parks where you can't even put your slide outs out, and you can shake hands with your neighbor through the window, and you just want to get out of there. You don't want to stay there.
Right.
So they're so much nicer if you give a little space between each RV.
But when you say acre, that's the total acreage,
Right.
not in any given area. So there could be 5 acres in the corner where all 128 units are crammed into there, and all the rest is open air.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Malin?
This is 16 acre lot, correct?
Yeah, a little bit, maybe a little bit more, but approximately.
Give or take, right. So how much of that is actual dry land that you can put an RV on? And are you going to assess the capacity to put things in there on all 16 or just on the dry areas?
If I could just jump in real quick, I would remind everybody, this today is not about this development that may be coming. So the specifics about this property, I'm sure Mr. Cobbler can give you an answer. I just want to make sure you understand, we're not asking you to recommend approval or non-approval of the actual development that we all keep talking about.
Right.
This is just the framework for an ordinance so the code can allow for the possibility of that development to bring itself forward for you guys to consider. So I wanna make sure that's
It will come back here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see
Okay.
it, but
More than
maybe,
one
today-
time.
the actual specifics of the size and what that this particular piece of property is made up on. Again, I want them to give the answer that you want, but just understand for today's purposes, that's not as important. It's just the idea of allowing such
And
Right. And I,
can't give that answer, by the way.
an answer anyway.
and I don't need a specific answer. I just want to make sure that wasn't lost,
Yeah.
because if you say X number of people per acre, but half or more, that's on the water. I just want to know how you're going to account for that.
Yeah.
But I can let it go.
And I don't want you to. It was a good question.
Let me sort of answer your question in a different way. Maybe it's a different question than what you asked, but I think it arrives at the same conclusion. So this is a framework for what a development that could go in an area that qualifies for a PUD. When it ultimately gets to be a site plan approval, it comes to you and ultimately to council. There's ability within the PUD process to modify a lot of these things.
Okay.
Right? So in the end, what we're trying to set is standards that you can base decisions on going forward, but understand that there could be changes made to that as part of the process.
Okay.
And so I think, again, it's important to capture those questions and remember them as it goes forward, but it's something that why we think PUD works better. There's so many potential thoughts when the developer puts it together. It just doesn't fit nicely into a regular section for zoning. And we want to give, the developer the ability to be creative and build something that would be very beneficial to the city as well to them. At the same time allows you and then council to have standards to hold people accountable for.
All right.
It gives them the ability to create a framework, provide us a site plan so that we can modify or recommend or anything else.
Yep.
It's just the first step. So, which, like Lisa said, we circle back to again. So,
I make a motion.
perfect. I'd love to hear one.
I make a motion that we redesignate this property to a PUD district.
That's not the motion. Just let me help. This is the framework for me to draft an ordinance.
Right.
So this possibility. So it would be a motion. Well, it's motion to recommend to council that you would like, I don't even know how to make
Okay,
the motion
yes.
now.
I make a recommendation that council look at this and review to change it to a PUD district.
To allow for PUD RV district in the code.
I'll second.
Okay. Now
All
that we
in
got
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect.
oh, public comment.
Yes. Do I have any public comments? Yes.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Todd.
Thank you all for your time. Matthew Todd, 8301 Congress Street. I'm helping the people that want to develop this, and this was originally what I wanted to do with the property. I just wanted to try to ease all of your mind, whether it's me or the people that want to do this as well. We want to be a partner to the city. We don't want to be a burden. Just what the lady there said, she made a very valid point, and you made a valid point. We don't want a slummy dirtbag place. We want it to be upscale, and as we're fortunate to have our new city manager, class act guy, I emphasize this enough. We want it upscale. When you start letting certain things in there, that pushes the class of people out that we're wanting there. We're wanting the vehicles that we're dealing with, they're 450,000, 200,000 and above RVs that we're dealing with. And what we were wanting to do was put floating cabins and some high-end tree houses. And when we say high-end tree houses, like $150,000 tree houses a piece. And what we were trying to do is create a destination for the city. The piece of property that I have there, I'm trying to basically, in a sense, do something valuable back to the city. I have a lot of friends in the city, and I respect every single one of you. We might have disagreements, but I think all of you are outstanding people. And I thank you for what you're doing here and getting it to this point. But our goal is to basically try to generate revenue. The people that we have renting, we're getting $4,200 a month for a campsite. So if you do $4,200 a month times, just say 100 campsites, you can do the math. That's what KOAs bring in. That's basically what we're trying to do. So as soon as you allow a lower type of form of things in there, it's going to drive the good people out of there. We have guidelines because you have license, bonded, and insurance that you have to go by. Campers got, when they come in, they got to be checked for the propane. They got to be checked on every single aspects because of the liability that you have there. As far as what the lady was saying about the 8 campers, in some things when this comes back to you, that might even be cut back some because how we want to put it around the area that's in there, being able to have fire trucks come in there, we're putting fire hydrants in there, and what have you. And we want to put an exercise facility in there. So it's there. This is basically, I think, was a brilliant idea what the city manager came up with, and it's like any questions that you have. I mean, I'll try to answer them in any way, shape, or form. We're not trying to be a thorn in your side. We just see the value in the piece of property this way. So I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense to keep going, and the city's gaining nothing out of this to where the city, I'm trying to make it where it's putting tax revenue back for the residents to help pay for some of these projects, so it ain't on the taxpayers' backs. And that's what all I'm trying to accomplish for you. Thank you for your time. He covered it.
Last time that we met, we talked about those awnings for the boats. I spoke with Jeremy Gamble of Canvas Boat Lift Covers.
Okay.
And he said he knows all about this. He would be willing to come and talk to us at a meeting and tell us everything he knows. Lots of those meetings. But he said the key word is removable, to add
Absolutely.
that word to your description.
Great.
Contact. So when that comes back around, we see if that's something that we want to do.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Great. Do I have any other questions? How about one to
You know that we want.
Motion to.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for coming.